The ancient world was far more connected than we ever realized. Long before satellites and the internet, a complex web of forgotten maritime highways linked distant continents. These were not just simple trade routes, but the very arteries of civilization, carrying goods, ideas, and entire cultures across the open ocean. By the end of this journey, you will see the deep roots of our modern globalized world in a completely new light. We will uncover why these vast aquatic networks vanished from our collective memory and what incredible secrets they left behind. What does it truly mean to be connected across a vast and unknown sea? A single log, pushed into a current by a curious ancestor, was the first vessel. That simple act of floating a piece of wood down a river was a spark that would eventually light the entire ancient world. From those humble beginnings, humanity's relationship with water transformed. Bundles of reeds were lashed together, hollowed-out tree trunks became canoes. These were not just tools for survival, they were the first prototypes for a future of global connection. The real transformation, however, came with the capture of the wind. The invention of the sail was as revolutionary for its time as the steam engine would be millennia later. It freed travelers from the exhausting labor of paddling, turning the invisible force of the air into a relentless, silent engine. For the first time, people could venture beyond the sight of land, not as desperate castaways, but as intentional explorers. What compelled them to do it? Why leave the safety of the known for the terrifying uncertainty of the open ocean? It was more than just the search for new fishing grounds or resources. It was a deep, innate human drive, a combination of sheer necessity and boundless curiosity. A community facing hardship on a crowded coastline would look to the horizon for a new beginning. A craftsman in one region might hear whispers of a rare, beautiful stone found only across the water. This powerful mix of need and wonder propelled those early mariners. They carried with them more than just supplies. In the hulls of their boats were their families, their beliefs, their stories of gods and heroes. Each voyage was a thread, and with every successful journey, those threads began to weave together, forming the first fragile strands of a web that would one day span the globe. The scent of cinnamon on the wind was a promise of unimaginable wealth. This was the call of the Erythraean Sea, a name ancient geographers gave to the waters connecting the Roman world with India. More than just a body of water, it was the world's first superhighway, a meticulously charted corridor of commerce powered by a breathtaking natural force, the monsoon winds. Each year, Roman merchants would wait for the seasonal shift. They would set their sails to catch the steady, predictable gusts that blew relentlessly from the southwest, carrying their heavily laden ships directly to the Malabar coast of India. This was not a haphazard journey into the unknown. It was a scheduled, almost ritualistic crossing, a testament to a deep and hard-won understanding of the planet's rhythms. These sailors were harnessing a global weather system as their engine, turning a terrifying force of nature into a reliable maritime conveyor belt. At the heart of this operation was a remarkable document, a sailor's guide known as the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. Think of it as an ancient combination of a pilot's manual and a merchant's almanac. It did not just list destinations, it detailed everything a captain needed to know: the safe harbors, the treacherous headlands, the local chieftains to appease, and the specific goods available at each port. It told you where to find the finest pearls, the most pungent pepper, and the most brilliant gems. This scroll was a tangible map of a globalized economy, written by those who had sailed its length. The goods exchanged were legendary. From Rome came gold and silver coinage, fine wine, and exquisite glassware. In return, the Roman world received pepper that was worth its weight in silver, fragrant cinnamon, silks, and diamonds, luxuries that defined status and power in the imperial capital. But these ships carried far more than spices and silk. They were floating arcs of culture. In the bustling ports of South India, archaeologists have unearthed hoards of Roman coins, proof of vibrant, long-term trade. Meanwhile, ideas were also making the journey. Concepts from Indian philosophical schools began to subtly infiltrate the intellectual circles of the Mediterranean, while tales of Roman engineering and law traveled east. This highway was a two-way street for the human imagination, proving that commerce and culture are inseparable travelers. The entire system, however, rested on a fragile, annual pact with nature. The same winds that carried ships to India would, months later, reverse direction, blowing from the northeast to carry them home. A captain who misjudged this cycle faced being stranded for an entire year, a devastating financial loss. This intricate dance with the wind reveals a forgotten truth. Ancient globalization was not born from brute force, but from a profound and delicate synchronization with the natural world. And while this network flourished in the West, an equally sophisticated and even more vast web of connection was being spun across the distant waters of the East. Far to the east, a different kind of maritime empire rose from the tropical mists. The air in the Spice Islands was thick with the scent of cloves and nutmeg, treasures so valuable they drew the world to this remote archipelago. This was not a single, disciplined highway like the Roman route to India, but a sprawling, living web of countless sea lanes connecting thousands of islands. Sailors from the powerful Srivijaya and Majapahit empires were the masters of this aquatic maze. They navigated not with grand maps, but with an intimate knowledge of the stars, the currents, and the slightest shifts in the wind, piloting their massive trading ships known as jong through a labyrinth of emerald islands. They created a decentralized network of incredible resilience, where goods and ideas could flow through 100 different channels. The primary currency of this eastern network was sensory. Fragrant cloves from the Moluccas, pungent nutmeg from the Banda Islands, and prized peppers were loaded onto ships heading west. In return, these vessels brought the brilliant colors of Indian cotton and the exquisite celadon glaze of Chinese porcelain. This was an exchange of desires where the flavors of the East were traded for the artistic masterpieces of the mainland. But this network did more than move spices and ceramics. It moved entire worldviews. As merchant ships moved between ports, they carried with them the profound philosophies of Hinduism and Buddhism. These ideas did not arrive as foreign impositions, but slowly took root in the local soil, transforming and being transformed by the existing cultures. The result of this cultural fusion stands to this day in stone, most spectacularly at the temple of Borobudur on the island of Java. This immense structure, a man-made mountain of carved stone, is a perfect map of the Buddhist cosmos, yet its very form echoes the volcanic peaks that dominate the Indonesian landscape. It is a permanent monument to the power of maritime connection, a symbol of how local traditions and imported beliefs could merge into something entirely new and magnificent. The existence of this vibrant, sophisticated network forces us to reconsider our historical perspective. For centuries, the narrative of global trade has been centered on the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. Yet here, flourishing independently for centuries, was a system just as complex and influential, a world of its own that was fully globalized long before European ships ever entered these waters. Its secrets were protected by the very complexity of its routes and the vastness of the seas it called home. While these eastern and western highways thrived, an even more audacious connection was being forged, one that would link the entire planet for the first time. The ocean was not an empty space to these sailors, but a living realm of divine wills and unpredictable moods. To venture onto its surface was to enter the domain of powerful beings who demanded respect. For a Greek captain, every sudden squall was a potential sign of Poseidon's displeasure, his trident stirring the waters from the depths. A Phoenician sailor would whisper prayers to Yam, the primordial sea god, hoping to calm his restless heart. These deities were not distant figures of myth. They were as real and present as the wood of the ship itself, personifications of the very forces the mariners sought to survive. This spiritual framework was the bedrock of ancient navigation, a system that seamlessly wove together hard-won empirical knowledge with profound ritual. Before a ship's hull even touched the water, ceremonies were performed. Animals might be offered to the gods, their acceptance seen as a crucial omen for the journey ahead. The flight patterns of birds were studied not just for directional clues, but for divine messages. The wind was not merely a physical phenomenon, it was the breath of a god to be courted or appeased. This was not a rejection of observation, but its enhancement. A Polynesian navigator, for instance, possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of stars, currents, and the subtle patterns of swells that reflected distant islands. Yet this immense practical skill was guided by a deep reverence for Kanaloa, the god of the ocean. His spiritual presence gave meaning to the data, transforming a cold calculation of wave angles into a conversation with the sea itself. This fusion of the practical and the spiritual provided the psychological backbone for voyages into the absolute unknown. When a Norse longship was engulfed by North Atlantic waves, the crew's fear was tempered by ritual. They knew the stories of Aegir, the brewer of the ocean's ale, and knew that courage and respect might see them through his hall. The belief system was a vital tool for morale, offering a sense of control in a fundamentally uncontrollable environment. It created a narrative that made the terrifying vastness of the sea comprehensible, a place where human action through prayer and sacrifice could influence the outcome. This holistic wayfinding, where every gust of wind and every cresting wave held both physical and spiritual significance, allowed humanity to conquer its fear of the deep. And with that courage, they began to build connections that would one day span the entire globe, linking continents in a web of trade and cultural exchange that reshaped the world. The Mediterranean was a liquid continent, its shores linked by a constant flow of wooden ships. Phoenician vessels, painted with the symbols of their gods, were the first to truly master these waters. They were not conquerors seeking land, but merchants in pursuit of raw materials, and their courage was legendary. They sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the terrifying fog of the Atlantic to reach the tin mines of ancient Britain. They are even said to have circumnavigated Africa, a voyage so epic it was dismissed as myth for centuries. Their greatest legacy, however, was not a trade route but an idea, a simple set of symbols that could capture human speech. The Phoenician alphabet was a piece of cargo more valuable than any metal, a tool of communication that the Greeks would adopt and adapt, eventually giving it to the world. The Greeks then picked up this maritime torch, their own ships following in the Phoenician wake but driven by a different impulse. While trade was essential, the Greek expansion was also a story of people seeking new beginnings. Their colonies sprouted like seeds carried on the sea breeze, from the chilly shores of the Black Sea to the sunny coasts of southern France. Each new settlement was a piece of Greece planted on foreign soil, and with them traveled the foundational ideas of Western philosophy, democratic ideals, and artistic principles that would shape cultures for millennia. Then came Rome, turning this network of routes into a single, unified system. They declared the Mediterranean Mare Nostrum, our sea, and for the first time it was not an empty boast. The sea became Rome's logistical heart, with a predictable rhythm of massive grain ships traveling from Egypt to feed the million-strong population of the capital. This was the ancient equivalent of a just-in-time delivery system for an entire civilization, and it was made possible by the Roman mastery of law and engineering. Roman ports, with their massive concrete harbors and towering lighthouses, were feats of infrastructure that standardized and secured this vital traffic. This constant churn of movement across the Middle Sea was a millennia-long conversation. Phoenician practicality, Greek thought, and Roman order mixed in the hulls of ships and on the docks of bustling ports. They did not merely trade goods, they traded the very building blocks of culture. The shared foundation of Western civilization was not forged in a single, isolated place. It was assembled piece by piece, idea by idea, across the waves of this inland sea, proving that our greatest cultural achievements are often the product of connection, not isolation. And while these networks bound the known world of Europe, Africa, and Asia, another group of sailors was undertaking the most breathtaking voyages of all, navigating a water world so vast it seemed to have no end. The hull of a ship was the ancient world's ultimate passport. Without a vessel capable of defying wind and wave, the grandest maritime highway was nothing more than an impassable road. Every culture, facing its own unique sea, engineered a perfect solution. The Romans built floating fortresses, broad-beamed cargo ships with massive square sails designed to haul immense loads of grain and amphorae across the predictable swells of the Mediterranean. Half a world away, Arab traders developed the D. How? Its iconic triangular sail catching the wind with an efficiency that allowed it to slice through the variable breezes of the Indian Ocean. Each design was a direct conversation with the water it sailed, a physical answer to the questions posed by the sea, but perhaps the most breathtaking answer came from the Polynesian shipwrights. Their creation, the double-hulled Wakolua, was less a boat and more a floating island. Two parallel hulls connected by a sturdy platform created a stable base that could withstand the vast, rolling swells of the open Pacific. This vessel was a self-contained world, carrying families, livestock, and seedlings for taro and breadfruit on voyages that could last for weeks across thousands of miles of trackless ocean. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a craft built from island resources that was nonetheless capable of conquering the planet's greatest expanse of water. In the cold fjords of the north, a different kind of mastery took shape. The Norse Longship was a predator of the sea. Its shallow draft allowed it to slide onto any beach and sail far upriver, bringing its crew of explorers and traders deep into the heart of continents. The iconic dragon head carved on its prow was not merely for show. It was a declaration, a spiritual ward meant to protect the crew and terrify those who saw it approach from the mist. Building such a vessel was never just a matter of carpentry. It was a sacred act, a ritual that bound the entire community. The selection of the right trees, the laying of the keel, and the final launching were all accompanied by ceremonies and blessings. The community's collective hope, its economic survival, and the very lives of its sons and fathers were all invested in the integrity of that wooden hull. When we look at these ships, we see more than just clever engineering. We see the physical containers of civilization itself. They were the engines of exchange, carrying not only silks and spices but languages, laws, and legends across the globe. The design of a ship's hull directly shaped the flow of history, determining which ideas would travel and where they would finally make landfall. The predictability of the monsoons transformed the Indian Ocean into a grand seasonal clock. For 6 months, the winds would blow steadily from the southwest, and the ports of East Africa and Arabia would empty as ships set their sails for India. Then, as if by divine agreement, the winds would reverse, breathing from the northeast to guide those same vessels home. This was not a route conquered by empires, but a highway gifted by the sky itself, a natural rhythm that dictated the pulse of trade from the Swahili coast to the islands of Southeast Asia. It created a system of incredible reliability, allowing merchants to plan their vast, year-long journeys with a confidence unknown in other parts of the ancient world. The true magic, however, happened not on the open water, but in the ports where these winds converged. Cities like Zanzibar, Cambay, and Malacca became the world's first global hubs, teeming with a diversity that would rival any modern metropolis. On a single dock, you could hear the negotiations of an Arab spice merchant, a Gujarati textile trader, a Jewish financier, and a Chinese official overseeing the exchange of silk. These were places where cultures did not just meet, they melded. A Persian astrolabe for navigation might sit beside a Chinese compass, while the architectural styles of a temple could blend Hindu carvings with Islamic geometric patterns. The goods exchanged were a sensory map of the known world: African ivory and gold, Arabian frankincense and myrrh, the brilliant colors of Indian cotton, and the impossible smoothness of Chinese porcelain all changed hands in a constant, vibrant flow. This was more than commerce, it was a grand conversation conducted through objects. But what is perhaps most remarkable about this maritime marketplace was its enduring peace. For centuries, this vast network operated without a single dominant naval power imposing its will. Trade was governed by mutual interest and the unspoken laws of the monsoon, which punished aggression and rewarded cooperation. A captain who gained a reputation for treachery would find no friendly port when the life-giving winds shifted. This system demonstrates a profound historical truth: that connection does not always require conquest. The Indian Ocean Highway thrived on a foundation of shared necessity and cultural curiosity, proving that the most resilient networks are often those built not by force, but by the simple, powerful desire to exchange. On a clear, moonless night far from land, the only constants for an ancient mariner were the stars. With no magnetic compass to point the way, the night sky itself was their map, a glittering dome of fixed reference points that turned with the seasons. The skill of celestial navigation was the highest art of the ancient sailor, a complex science passed down through generations not in books, but in memory. The Polynesian voyagers were the undisputed masters of this art. They did not see the sky as a random scattering of lights, but as a great star compass, memorizing the precise rising and setting points of hundreds of individual stars. Each one was a beacon marking a specific direction on the vast, featureless ocean. A navigator would know that when a certain star was directly overhead, he was on the path to a specific island chain. This mental map was so precise and so deeply ingrained that a master navigator could point to his destination from thousands of miles away, simply by reading the celestial signposts. In the Mediterranean, sailors looked to the north, finding their guide in the steadfast Polaris, the North Star, because it appears almost fixed in the heavens, directly above the Earth's North Pole. It provided a reliable constant. By measuring its angle above the horizon, a captain could know his latitude, understanding how far north or south he had traveled. In the southern hemisphere, where Polaris disappears below the horizon, sailors instead relied on the distinctive shape of the Southern Cross, using its pointer stars to locate the southern celestial pole. This knowledge was far too precious to be written down. It was woven into the very fabric of culture, transmitted through elaborate chants, epic poems, and intricate stories. The navigator was more than just a skilled sailor. He was a living library, a revered elder who held the collective geographical memory of his entire people. His mind was the vessel that carried the secrets of the sea. This practice reveals a world where mythology and astronomy were inseparable. The constellations were not just pretty patterns, they were the gods and heroes of cultural lore painted across the sky. The story of Orion, the hunter chasing the Pleiades sisters across the heavens, was not merely a tale, it was a seasonal marker. When that constellation appeared in the eastern sky, it signaled a time for planting or a season for sailing. The sky was a grand, interactive storybook where every star had a name and every myth provided practical guidance. This celestial map was humanity's first truly global positioning system, a shared resource for every culture that dared to venture beyond the sight of land, uniting them under a single starry canopy. The cold waters of the Baltic Sea held a treasure washed ashore by the waves, a golden, translucent stone that was not a stone at all. This was amber, fossilized tree resin that captured the sunlight, and its allure would forge a maritime highway through the heart of northern Europe. While maps often show the amber road as a land path, its lifeblood was the sea and the great rivers that flowed into it. Sturdy Viking knars and Slavic trade boats, their hulls filled with the precious cargo, did not simply cross open water, they navigated a sophisticated coastal and riverine network. This route began on the Baltic shores, wound its way down the mighty Vistula and Oder rivers, and crossed the sea to bustling trading towns like Hedeby and Birka. These northern emporiums were the vibrant transfer points where the goods of the world came together. A trader from the north would exchange his gleaming amber, along with thick furs, beeswax for candles, and rich honey, for the luxuries arriving from the south, fine wines, expertly crafted weapons, and gleaming silver coinage. This constant exchange did far more than move objects, it connected entire worlds. The seemingly isolated communities of the Norse and the Slavs were not living in a vacuum. They were active participants in a continental economy, their fortunes directly linked to the desires of the Roman and later the Frankish empires. The success of this northern route reveals a crucial truth, that the ancient world's connective tissue was not limited to the warm, predictable waters of the Mediterranean or the Indian Ocean. Even the colder, stormier seas of the north, with their own unique challenges, were essential arteries in the global body, pulsing with the lifeblood of trade and cultural exchange that reached every shore. The docks of ancient Alexandria or the Malabar coast were not quiet places. They echoed with a dozen different tongues at once, a chaotic symphony of Greek, Tamil, Arabic, and languages now lost to time. In this linguistic storm, a miracle of practical communication was born. To trade, to negotiate, to simply understand a dockmaster's instructions, people from wildly different cultures developed simplified, hybrid languages. These were the essential operating systems of the maritime world, the linguistic glue that held entire networks together. In the Mediterranean, this common tongue was known as the lingua franca, a pidgin blend of Italian, Occitan, Greek, and Arabic. It was used by everyone from Sicilian sailors and Berber pirates to Byzantine merchants. Its vocabulary was brutally practical, stripped of complex grammar, focused on the essentials of commerce and navigation. A ship's captain could hail a port official using this shared code, asking for fresh water or the price of wax without either man speaking the other's native language. Far to the east, across the Indian Ocean, a simplified form of Arabic often played the same role. A merchant from Oman and a shipmaster from Gujarat could meet on a beach in Zanzibar and barter for ivory using this common linguistic ground. But these trade languages were never just about counting coins and measuring cloth. They became unexpected vehicles for a much deeper cultural exchange. Specialized words traveled with the goods they described. The Tamil word for rice or the Greek term for a specific type of sail would be adopted into the pidgin and then seep into local dialects hundreds of miles from their origin. Even more profound mythological concepts and stories hitchhiked on these linguistic routes. The name of a foreign god, a tale of a sea monster from a distant shore, or a new astronomical term would be shared in these simplified conversations, slowly weaving their way into the fabric of other cultures. This was not a formal, imposed language, but an organic, living creation of the sea itself. It proves that the most enduring connections are not always made by empires or armies, but through the simple human need to communicate and trade. The shared vocabulary of the docks created a shared understanding of the world, one negotiated word at a time. And just as words flowed across these watery highways, so too did something even more vital: the very food that sustained civilizations, carried in the holds of the same ships that transported language and legend. The Sahara's golden sands hid a secret river of commerce. This immense desert was not a barrier but a bridge, its trade routes flowing directly into the waiting hulls of ships on the Atlantic coast and the Mediterranean Sea. The lifeblood of this network was the great Niger River, a liquid highway winding through the heart of West Africa. Canoes heavily laden with gold, dust, and ivory traveled its currents, moving precious cargo from the inland empires toward the coast. There, at bustling ports, the goods were transferred to the deep-sea house of Arab and Berber traders, ready to begin the next leg of a journey that would span the globe. This was a seamless intermodal chain where river, desert, and ocean routes locked together like pieces of a single continent-spanning puzzle. Cities like Timbuktu were the grand central stations of this system. Far from being isolated desert outposts, they were cosmopolitan hubs where the scholar, the merchant, and the caravan master met. The wealth that built Timbuktu's legendary universities and libraries arrived on camelback from the north and in canoes from the south, all ultimately destined for the sea. This flow was constant, with gold, salt, and other resources moving north, while manufactured goods, textiles, and glass beads traveled south. Even in the heart of the Libyan desert, the ingenious Garamonte civilization engineered a system of underground tunnels to tap fossil water, creating agricultural centers that sustained their role as critical middlemen in this vast network. Their existence proves that human ingenuity could forge connections across the most unforgiving landscapes, all to feed the demands of a connected world. This trans-Saharan system forces us to expand our very definition of a maritime highway. It was not a single ocean route, but the indispensable terrestrial link that connected the Mediterranean's liquid continent to the rich interior of Africa. A piece of gold mined in the forests of modern Ghana could, through this chain of river and desert, end up as a coin in a Roman market. Its journey a testament to a level of economic integration we rarely attribute to the ancient world. The maritime highways were never truly isolated. They were the powerful termini of these longer chains, the points where local networks fused into a global one. This reveals a profound reality that the pulse of ancient globalization was felt far from the coast, deep in the heart of continents, all moving to the rhythm of the tides. A ship heavy with silk and spices was a floating fortune, and every fortune has its hunters. The same maritime highways that carried civilization's lifeblood also drew a shadow fleet, those who preferred to take what others had built. This was the dark reflection of global trade, the ever-present threat of piracy. From the legendary sea peoples whose raids contributed to the collapse of Bronze Age empires to the Illyrian pirates who brazenly preyed on Roman supply ships in the Adriatic, these marauders were a constant danger. They were not romantic outlaws, but a direct threat to the stability that allowed cultures to connect, capable of severing a vital trade route and starving a city of its essential goods. In response, civilizations were forced to become guardians. The Roman answer was the creation of permanent, professional navies known as the classes. These were not just wartime fleets, but dedicated patrol squadrons tasked with a singular mission to keep the sea lanes clear. Their galleys became a familiar and reassuring sight for merchant captains, a symbol of imperial power deployed to protect economic interests. This practical need for security was echoed in the realm of myth. The legendary hero Theseus was celebrated not just for slaying a minotaur, but for clearing the coastal waters of Greece of dangerous brigands, making the seas safe for travel and commerce. The story reflects a deep, universal desire for order over chaos on the unpredictable ocean. This eternal struggle between merchant and marauder became a powerful engine of innovation. The need to protect wealth spurred the development of faster, more maneuverable warships and led to the heavy fortification of strategic ports with walls and watchtowers. The very design of merchant vessels evolved, with higher sides to repel boarders and reinforced compartments to safeguard valuable cargo. Over centuries, this conflict even began to shape early concepts of international law, as neighboring states negotiated agreements on how to handle these sea-borne threats that respected no single nation's borders. The safety of a maritime highway was never guaranteed. It was a prize won through constant vigilance and ingenuity, a high-stakes contest where the security of the seas directly dictated the wealth and stability of empires. From the high, lonely mountains of Afghanistan came a blue that captured the very essence of the sky. This was lapis lazuli, a stone of such intense celestial color that it was seen as a fragment of the divine realm itself. Its journey to the workshops of the ancient world is a story of one of history's first truly integrated supply chains. Mined from the remote Sar-I-Sang valleys, the raw stone began its life on the backs of donkeys and camels, traveling the arduous land routes down to the shores of the Persian Gulf. But here its journey transformed. The stones were carefully loaded onto the hulls of sturdy trading vessels, beginning the final, crucial maritime leg of their voyage. These ships carried the precious blue cargo to the bustling ports of Mesopotamian city-states like where master craftsmen awaited. The deep blue of lapis was not merely a decorative preference. In the cultures of Mesopotamia and Egypt, this color was inextricably linked with the heavens, with power, and with the gods. It was believed to possess protective qualities, a piece of the night sky brought down to earth. This profound cultural meaning fueled an insatiable demand. We see its ultimate expression in the funeral mask of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun, where the lapis inlay forms the iconic beard and headdress, forever linking the boy king with the eternal divine. Centuries earlier, the magnificent standard of a mosaic of shell, red limestone, and lapis lazuli, depicted scenes of peace and war, using the brilliant blue to signify the importance of the rulers and their connection to the cosmic order. The value placed on this single stone created a network of staggering length and complexity. It linked the rugged, landlocked miners of Central Asia with the riverine civilizations of the Nile and the Euphrates, a chain of connection that stretched for thousands of miles. This was not a simple point-to-point trade route. It was a seamless handoff from mountain to desert, from river to sea, demonstrating an astonishing level of logistical coordination for the ancient world. The lapis lazuli trail stands as a powerful testament to a simple truth, that the pursuit of beauty and symbolic power could forge connections as strong as those built by the need for food or metal. It reveals an ancient globalized economy where a rare stone from one corner of the world became the ultimate symbol of authority in another, all because a deep blue color was seen as a bridge to the gods. A ship's hold was far more than a storage space. It was a floating catalogue of the ancient world's desires and demands. While we remember the legendary silks and spices, the true backbone of these maritime empires was the heavy, bulk cargo that rarely features in epic poems. Think of the massive grain ships that sailed from Alexandria to Rome, their hulls packed so densely with Egyptian wheat that they fed the million inhabitants of the imperial capital for months. This was the ancient equivalent of a constant supply chain, a lifeline of calories and carbohydrates that sustained an urban civilization. Without this steady, seaborne delivery of food, the city of Rome would have simply collapsed. The same was true for the cedars of Lebanon, towering trees felled and lashed together into rafts to be towed by Phoenician ships. This wood was not a luxury. It was a strategic material that built the navies and temples of empires from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Beyond food and timber, ships carried the very tools of administration and culture. The marshes of the Nile Delta produced papyrus, the paper of the ancient world. Without this portable, durable writing material carried by ship to every corner of the Mediterranean, the complex record-keeping of governments and the spread of literary works would have been drastically slower. Then there were the dyes, most famously Tyrian purple, a color so potent and expensive it became the exclusive mark of royalty. Harvesting it was a monumental task, requiring thousands of mollusks to produce a single gram of dye, making a purple bordered toga a walking statement of immense wealth and power. These ships also carried scent skyward, transporting frankincense and myrrh from the arid coasts of southern Arabia to temples across the civilized world, where their smoke was believed to carry prayers directly to the gods. This created a deep and fragile interdependence. A storm season that disrupted the tin routes from distant Britain could halt bronze production across the entire Mediterranean, leaving armies without weapons and artisans without tools. A political conflict in the Sinai could cut off the supply of turquoise, stalling the production of sacred jewelry in Egypt. The entire system was a complex, interlocking machine where a single failed component could send ripples of disruption across continents. The sheer volume and diversity of goods in constant motion created a material richness and a cultural sophistication that was truly staggering. For centuries after the collapse of this networked world, Europe would not see this level of global connection and accessible luxury again until the age of the Renaissance. All of it was powered not by steam or steel, but by the simple, elegant capture of the wind in a linen sail. The greatest ocean highway was not a route between ports, but a pathway into emptiness. While other cultures sailed from one known shore to another, the Polynesians embarked into a blue abyss with no guarantee of land on the other side. Their story is not one of accidental drift, but of intentional, breathtaking exploration across the Pacific, the largest single feature on our planet. They sailed against the prevailing winds and currents on a mission of permanent settlement, a deliberate leap into the unknown that stands as humanity's most audacious maritime achievement. Their vessel was the Wa Kolua, a double-hulled canoe as long as a modern city bus, engineered not for speed but for survival. These were floating arks carrying everything needed to start a new life. In their holds were precious seedlings of taro and yams, breadfruit saplings, and domesticated animals like chickens and pigs. They carried more than supplies, they carried an entire civilization in microcosm, a complete cultural package ready to be transplanted onto whatever shore they found. The true engine of this expansion was not the canoe itself, but the knowledge held in the mind of the navigator. Without a compass or chart, these master wayfinders read the ocean as if it were a textured map. They memorized the precise rising and setting points of hundreds of stars, creating a mental star compass that guided them across thousands of miles. They learned to read the subtle patterns of ocean swells, sensing how they bent around unseen islands. They watched for specific species of birds, whose flight patterns at dawn and dusk betrayed the direction of land far beyond the horizon. This profound, holistic understanding of nature turned the terrifying emptiness of the Pacific into a navigable seascape. Over centuries, this one-way web of discovery connected the most isolated dots on Earth. From a likely origin in the islands of Tonga and Samoa, these voyagers found and settled Tahiti and the Marquesas. From there, they launched the longest leg of all, sailing north to the Hawaiian Islands, a pinprick in a vast ocean. In another incredible feat, they sailed southeast to Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and southwest to the temperate shores of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Each new landfall was not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new chapter, as voyages of remembrance and trade continued between these far-flung island families for generations. This was a highway built not for commerce but for life itself. It represents a pure expression of human curiosity and courage, a relentless drive to see what lay beyond the horizon. The Polynesian expansion proves that the most powerful connections are sometimes not for moving goods, but for carrying hope, culture, and the future itself across the waves. A ship's cargo manifest could never truly capture its most valuable freight. Beneath the bundles of silk and amphorae of wine lay a more subtle, transformative cargo, the seeds of entire worldviews. These maritime highways became the central nervous system for the flow of ideas, carrying philosophies, religious beliefs, and scientific knowledge across continents with a speed and safety that land routes could rarely match. Consider the journey of Buddhism. It began as a regional philosophy in northern India, but it was aboard the merchant ships traversing the Indian Ocean and the South China Sea that it found its global voice. Monks and pilgrims often traveled with trading fleets, their passage secured by a shared devotion with wealthy merchants who saw spiritual benefit in supporting them. As these ships made landfall in the bustling ports of Southeast Asia and the coastal cities of China, the teachings of the Buddha took root, adapting to and transforming the local cultures they encountered. This was not an invasion of ideas, but a slow, profound conversation conducted across the waves. One of the most visually stunning results of this exchange occurred in the ancient region of Gandhara, located in modern-day Pakistan and Afghanistan. Here, along the overland and maritime silk routes, Greek artistic traditions, a legacy of Alexander the Great's campaigns, met the burgeoning Buddhist faith. The result was a breathtaking new art form. For the first time, the Buddha was depicted in human form, and his features bore the distinct mark of classical Greek sculpture, with flowing robes reminiscent of a Roman toga and a face of serene Apollonian beauty. This Greco-Buddhist fusion stands as a permanent monument to the creative power of cultural connection, proving that when worlds collide at a crossroads, they can generate something entirely new and magnificent. The exchange was not limited to art and religion. Our very system of numbers, the base 10 numerals we use for every calculation today, began its journey in India. Indian mathematicians developed the concept of zero as a placeholder, a revolutionary idea that made complex mathematics possible. This knowledge was not carried by conquering armies, but by traders and scholars moving along the same maritime networks that carried pepper and gems. Arab merchants and mathematicians, acting as the vital middlemen, adopted and refined the system, eventually transmitting it to the ports of the Mediterranean. From there, it entered Europe, where it was mistakenly called Arabic numerals, its true Indian origin obscured by the path it traveled. This single intellectual import, the concept of nothingness that made everything possible, fundamentally reshaped science, commerce, and navigation across the globe. This great convergence of thought created a shared intellectual heritage that stretched from the Yellow Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. Knowledge of astronomy, medicine, and alchemy circulated freely between the Islamic world, India, and China, with each culture adding its own layer of discovery to a growing body of human understanding. A medical text from Baghdad might incorporate remedies from an Indian physician, while a Chinese alchemist's search for immortality would contribute to early chemical practices elsewhere. This slow-motion dialogue, facilitated by the predictable rhythm of the monsoon winds and the relative security of the sea lanes, was the true glue of the ancient world. It created a foundational layer of shared knowledge, a common heritage of human curiosity and innovation that would one day provide the groundwork for the modern scientific revolution. The most powerful connections were not made of silk or spice, but of thought itself. The route to Punt was the ancient world's most exclusive trade secret. Guarded with the same intensity as a state secret, this maritime corridor across the Red Sea was the pharaoh's personal gateway to the divine. It was not a path for independent merchants or common sailors. This was a royal enterprise, a massive logistical operation funded entirely from the treasury of the king, designed to bring back not just goods, but legitimacy itself. The destination was a land so rich and mysterious it was practically mythical, a place the Egyptians called the Terraces of Incense, believed to be nestled somewhere in the Horn of Africa. What they sought there were the very materials that defined sacred power. They needed the fragrant resin of myrrh for temple rituals, its smoke believed to carry prayers to the gods. They desired the dark, dense wood of ebony for crafting sacred statues and the luxurious furniture of the royal court. They even brought back live animals like the leopards and baboons depicted in temple art, creatures so exotic they were living proof of the pharaoh's reach into otherworldly realms. Our clearest window into these epic voyages comes from the mortuary temple of Queen Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahri. The walls there are not just decorated, they are a detailed documentary carved in stone. They show the entire expedition, from the construction of the massive, seagoing ships on the Nile to their triumphant return. You can see the vessels with their towering bipedal masts and dozens of rowers being loaded with trade goods. Then, in the land of Punt, the reliefs depict the respectful exchange with the local chieftain and his wife. Finally, the most celebrated scene, the ships returning to Egypt, their hulls so heavy with myrrh trees, ivory, gold, and animal skins that they ride low in the water. This was more than a shopping list, it was a political and spiritual statement. A successful return from Punt was public proof that the gods favored the ruler's reign. For a female pharaoh like Hatshepsut, whose authority was constantly questioned, this divine endorsement was priceless. The voyage cemented her power, demonstrating her ability to command the forces of nature and diplomacy to secure the most coveted items in the known world. This highway reveals a profound truth about ancient exploration. While commerce was always a factor, the deepest currents driving these journeys were often ideological and spiritual. The pharaoh did not send these costly fleets merely for economic gain. He did it to acquire the physical ingredients of sanctity, the substances that made ritual effective and royal power visible and fragrant. The land of Punt itself was less a geographical location and more a concept, a blessed land at the edge of the world where the gods had stored their most precious creations. By reaching it, the pharaoh was not just a trader, he was a mediator between the Egyptian people and the sources of cosmic power. This corridor, one of the first long-distance maritime routes in history, set a powerful precedent. It showed that the most enduring connections could be forged by the pursuit of meaning, a search for the sacred that propelled ships across the sea and bound the fate of a civilization to the mysteries that lay beyond the horizon. The same ships that carried culture and wealth also carried an invisible ecological toll. The demand for resources on an industrial scale reshaped landscapes far from the bustling ports. To build their vast merchant and military fleets, empires turned to the legendary cedars of Lebanon. These towering trees, prized for their durable, aromatic wood, were felled in such numbers that entire mountainsides were stripped bare, leaving eroded slopes where once a great forest had stood. This was not simple logging. It was the systematic deforestation of a region to fuel the engine of maritime trade. The Roman world's appetite for spectacle created another kind of depletion. The exotic animals captured for gladiatorial games in the Colosseum, including lions, elephants, and rhinos, were sourced from the wilds of North Africa and the Middle East. The relentless removal of these magnificent creatures for public entertainment led to their local disappearance, emptying ecosystems to satisfy the demands of a distant urban populace. Beyond the visible world of timber and animals, the extraction of metals to feed the trade networks left its own deep scars. The intensive mining of silver in Spain and tin in Britain required vast quantities of timber for smelting, leading to further deforestation. The smelting process itself released heavy metals into the soil and waterways, a form of ancient industrial pollution whose traces can still be found in ice cores and peat bogs today. Perhaps the most profound changes, however, came from the accidental passengers. The black rat, a stowaway in the holds of Roman grain ships, spread from its native India to infest the entire Mediterranean. This small creature carried with it fleas that would later play a devastating role in historical health crises, forever altering the demographic landscape of Europe. The maritime highways also became a global conveyor belt for the plant kingdom. Cotton, originally from the Indian subcontinent, was transplanted to new continents. Citrus fruits from Southeast Asia found new homes in the Middle East and eventually the Mediterranean. This great exchange of flora was a double-edged sword, creating new agricultural opportunities, but also disrupting local ecologies by introducing invasive species that crowded out native plants. These ancient networks were the very first agents of globalized environmental change. They demonstrate a pattern we now know all too well, that human connection and commerce, for all their benefits, inevitably reshape the natural world. The choices made by ancient merchants and consumers, the demand for a certain wood, a particular spice, or a rare animal, sent ripples across the planet, creating a footprint that reminds us our global story has always been intertwined with the health of the Earth itself. The scale of Admiral Zheng's treasure fleets defies belief. His largest ships stretched over 400 feet from stem to stern, their decks wide enough to hold entire villages, their masts towering like a forest of trees. This was not a handful of vessels, but an armada of hundreds of ships carrying tens of thousands of sailors, soldiers, and diplomats. For nearly 3 decades in the early 15th century, this colossal fleet became the master of the Indian Ocean's ancient maritime highways, a floating empire of unmatched power and grace. Their mission was unlike anything the world had seen. This was not a voyage of conquest or a desperate search for resources. It was a grand, deliberate projection of Ming Dynasty prestige, a diplomatic tour on an oceanic scale. The fleet moved from port to port, from Java to the Swahili coast of Africa, not to claim territory, but to awe local rulers with the sheer majesty of the Chinese emperor. They exchanged magnificent gifts of porcelain and silk for tokens of submission and tribute, integrating dozens of kingdoms into a vast, China-centered web of trade and diplomacy. The most symbolic of all the treasures brought back were the living gifts. A giraffe, transported with immense care from the coast of Kenya, was presented to the emperor's court as a qilin, a mythical Chinese creature of good omen. Its arrival was seen as divine confirmation of the emperor's virtuous rule, a sign that heaven itself blessed these maritime endeavors. The fleet's very existence was a testament to a separate, highly advanced path of maritime development in the East. While European ships were still small, coastal vessels, the Chinese were building floating cities capable of crossing the world's greatest ocean. This highway represented the absolute apex of what was possible, a network of connection built on organized state power and technological supremacy. And this leads to one of history's most profound questions. What if this path had continued? What if China had not, in a sudden and fateful decision, turned inward, scuttling its great fleet and burning its nautical charts? The age of discovery that followed just decades later, driven by European caravels, might have unfolded entirely differently. It could have been an age of Chinese global connection, a world linked by the sophisticated, bureaucratic networks of the Ming rather than the conquest-driven model of the West. The treasure fleets of Zheng are a ghost in the machine of history, a glimpse of a different kind of globalization that was not centered on Europe. They show us that our modern, interconnected world was not an inevitable outcome, but the result of specific choices and abandoned possibilities. This forgotten highway is a monument to a road not taken, a path of connection that vanished into the mist, leaving behind only the echo of what might have been. A hero's quest for a golden fleece might seem like pure fantasy, but it could also be a poetic map of a very real trade route. The story of Jason and his Argonauts sailing to the far-off kingdom of Colchis in the region of modern Georgia perfectly mirrors the early Greek push into the resource-rich Black Sea. This was not a mythical sea, but a lucrative highway for metals, grains, and other treasures. The legend preserves the memory of that dangerous, pioneering journey into a world that was, for early storytellers, the very edge of the known. Similarly, the mesmerizing Irish Imram tales, like the Voyage of St. Brendan, depict monks sailing across the Atlantic through a misty world of crystal pillars and fiery islands. While clearly fantastical, these stories describe navigating using bird flight patterns and surviving on fish and seabirds, details drawn from genuine seafaring experience. Some researchers suggest they could be a deeply encoded memory of pre-Viking voyages, a cultural echo of someone long ago who saw the shores of North America and returned with a tale so incredible it could only be told as a spiritual journey. Even the world's oldest epic, the Mesopotamian story of Gilgamesh, sends its hero across a deadly sea to a distant garden in search of a plant that grants eternal life. This could easily be a mythological interpretation of a real trade mission sent to acquire rare, life-extending herbs or resins from a faraway land, the ultimate goal of any journey transformed into a quest for immortality itself. These myths were far more than simple entertainment. They were the living databases of the ancient world, a way to package vital navigational knowledge within a memorable and inspiring narrative. The specific sequence of islands in a hero's journey might correspond to actual stopping points on a trade route. The description of a monster guarding a narrow strait could be a warning to sailors about a particularly treacherous passage or a hostile tribe controlling the entrance. By celebrating the courage of a single cultural hero, these stories celebrated the collective bravery of all the anonymous merchants and explorers who ventured into the unknown, mapping the world one voyage at a time. They transformed the terrifying emptiness of the ocean into a realm of adventure and divine purpose, making the vast and mysterious world revealed by their sailors feel comprehensible and meaningful. A cold wind from the Greenland ice cap carried the scent of change for the Norse settlers. This was the final, fragile outpost of their Atlantic world, a community that clung to life for over 4 centuries, sustained entirely by the sea lanes connecting it back to Iceland and ultimately to Norway. Their survival was a delicate dance with the environment, a balance maintained by the regular arrival of trade ships bringing essential iron, timber, and news from the homeland. In return, these ships were loaded with the unique wealth of the Arctic narwhal tusks marketed in Europe as unicorn horns and precious walrus ivory, a commodity that found its way into the finest carvings and reliquaries of medieval churches. This trade was the colony's lifeline, a thin but resilient thread spun across the stormy North Atlantic. The true testament to Norse seafaring prowess, however, lies not in Greenland but in a place they called Vinland. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson guided his longship to a new shore far to the west, a land of mild climate and wild grapes, establishing the first known European settlement in the Americas. The archaeological site at Elance Aux Meadows in Newfoundland stands as silent, powerful proof of this journey. It was not a large or permanent colony, but its very existence rewrites our historical narratives. For a brief moment, the old world and the new were connected, not by accident, but by the skill and ambition of Viking explorers. The vessel that made this possible was a masterpiece of naval engineering, the iconic Longship. Its shallow draft allowed it to slide onto any beach and sail deep upriver, while its combination of a large, square sail and banks of oars gave it terrifying versatility. It could cross open ocean under wind power and then navigate the tightest inland waterways with muscle. This design philosophy, born in the fjords of Scandinavia, ultimately created a maritime bridge that spanned an entire ocean. So why did this transatlantic connection fade away? The Vinland settlement was likely abandoned due to its great distance and conflicts with the local inhabitants. The Greenland colony, however, endured for generations until a combination of a cooling climate and the gradual loss of their vital trade link, possibly as ivory fell out of fashion, led to its eventual end. Their story is not one of failure, but of incredible resilience. It reveals a forgotten chapter where the Atlantic was not a barrier, but a highway, a Norse bridge between worlds that stood for centuries, long before other European ships ever dreamed of what lay across the sea. The Great Forgetting began not with a bang, but with a slow unraveling of the world they had woven. If these intricate maritime highways were the very fabric of ancient globalization, why did they fray and fade from our collective memory? Their disappearance was not the result of a single cataclysm, but a quiet, centuries-long process where one era's vital routes became another's forgotten footnotes. In the Mediterranean, the slow collapse of the Western Roman Empire did not sink the ships, but it shattered the system. The intricate network of grain shipments, the protected sea lanes, and the standardized ports that made the Mare Nostrum a unified economic space gradually fragmented. Trade did not stop, but it became more localized, more dangerous, and far less documented, retreating from a grand highway to a series of precarious backroads. A profound shift was also occurring in the global balance of trade. The rapid expansion of the Islamic caliphates created a vast, unified land empire that stretched from the Iberian Peninsula to the borders of India. This new political reality made the overland Silk Road arteries incredibly efficient and secure for a time, drawing commerce and travelers back across the continents. The maritime routes of the Indian Ocean, while still active, temporarily lost their position as the undisputed center of global exchange. Even the climate itself seemed to turn against the old ways. A period of cooling known as the Little Ice Age brought harsher conditions to the North Atlantic. For the Norse settlers in Greenland and their voyages to Vinland, the increasingly treacherous sea ice and stormier passages made their lifeline back to Europe ever more fragile. This environmental pressure, combined with shifting trade goods, ultimately severed history's first transatlantic bridge. In Southeast Asia, the political landscape was transforming. The magnificent maritime empires of Srivijaya and Majapahit, whose power was rooted in their control of the sea lanes, eventually gave way to large, land-based kingdoms. These new powers derived their strength from territorial control and agriculture, their gaze turning inward away from the ocean that had once been the source of their region's wealth and influence. The vibrant, decentralized web of island traders lost its political center, yet the final, most decisive blow came from a new age of exploration. When Christopher Columbus stumbled upon the Americas and Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope to reach India, they were not discovering empty oceans. They were crashing into the edges of existing worlds, but the European empires that followed them proceeded to map, document, and dominate global trade on their own terms. The new oceanic routes they established, linking Europe directly to the Americas and Asia, became the central narrative of world history. The ancient, multicultural networks of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific were simply overwritten, relegated to the footnotes of a story now told from a Western perspective. The old highways were not destroyed, they were rendered obsolete, their complex stories simplified and then forgotten. The memory of these global connections did not vanish in a day, but faded like a weathered fresco, its colors slowly obscured by time until modern archaeologists, linguists, and historians began the patient work of restoration, carefully piecing together the true map of our connected past from the fragments left behind. A supertanker crossing the Indian Ocean today is tracing a ghost. Its route from the Arabian Peninsula to the Malabar coast is guided by the same monsoon winds that filled the sails of Roman merchant ships 2,000 years ago. The fundamental logic of the sea has not changed, and our modern global supply chain is simply the latest iteration of a system born in antiquity, now powered by diesel engines instead of seasonal gusts. These ancient maritime highways are not lost, they are buried just beneath the surface of our modern world, and their legacy is written into the very fabric of our daily lives. Look at the cultural DNA of any major port city. Zanzibar's architecture, with its ornate Arab doors and the call to prayer echoing over the Indian Ocean, is a direct inheritance from the Dhow traders who made it a hub. The vibrant Chinese communities found from Manila to Singapore are the living descendants of the merchants who traveled the spice routes. These are not recent developments, but the enduring result of patterns of human movement established millennia ago. Our dinner plates tell the same story. Italian cuisine is unimaginable without the tomato, a gift from the Americas that arrived via global sea lanes. Indian food draws its fire from chili peppers, another American plant that traveled across oceans to transform a continent's palate. The sugar in your coffee, once a rare luxury from Southeast Asia, became a global staple because these maritime routes created the demand. We are eating the history of these forgotten voyages with every meal. Even our language is a museum of these connections. The English word typhoon has roots in the Cantonese term for a great wind. The word orange comes from the Sanskrit word for the fruit, which traveled through Persian and Arabic before entering European languages. Every time we speak, we are using cargo that was unloaded from ancient ships, words that were traded alongside silk and pepper. Recognizing these threads does more than satisfy historical curiosity. It reframes our entire understanding of globalization. We did not invent a connected world in the 20th century. We inherited it. The internet and the container ship are merely new technologies laid upon the oldest and most resilient of human foundations, the deep, abiding need to reach across the water and share what we have, who we are, and what we know. Our journey across these forgotten seas reveals a story far greater than the sum of its traded goods. It is a powerful testament to human ingenuity and a deep, unshakable desire to reach beyond the horizon. These aquatic routes were the world's first true internet, a physical network of breathtaking scale that transmitted not just silks and spices, but the very DNA of civilization itself. They carried philosophies and faiths, artistic styles and scientific concepts, weaving together a planet that was profoundly interdependent long before our modern maps were ever drawn. From the spice-laden dhows of the Indian Ocean, guided by the rhythmic monsoons, to the star-guided canoes of the Pacific, navigating by the swell of the waves, these highways prove our ancestors were never truly isolated. They were active participants in a vibrant, complex conversation that spanned the globe. Recognizing these lost connections reshapes our entire understanding of history. It shows us that globalization is not a recent invention of the digital age, but a recurring, fundamental theme in the human story. The next time you savor a meal seasoned with pepper or speak a word borrowed from a distant shore, remember the ancient currents of exchange that brought it to you. These unifying seas remind us that our world has always been connected, its cultures forever intertwined by the timeless courage of those who first set sail into the blue unknown. We would love to hear what part of this story resonated most with you, so feel free to share your own thoughts in the comments